This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Con Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Con, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hey everyone, welcome back to Only the Strong Survive. I'm your host, Dan Con, and today our guest is Danny Combs. And besides having an excellent first name, Danny is the director of the Colorado Disability Opportunity Office. He also founded TACT, a program focused on getting neurodivergent people into skilled trades and real careers. And he co-founded the Colorado Neurodivergency Chamber of Commerce. Danny, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm really excited to get into this with you today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. I don't know if you were ever a Danny or if you've always been a Dan, but I'm sure.
I was a Danny to everybody from birth until high school. Okay. And then I made the conscious decision to lean into the Dan. But to my parents and my sister, I am Danny forever. So
it's fine. I get Daniel when I'm in trouble. And now that I'm getting older, my dad all of a sudden has switched to Dan. So it's kind of funny.
I don't know if you've ever looked for other Danny Combses out there, but there's another Dan Con, and I wrote a book last year, and the publishing company was like, "Hey, we need you to change your name," and I'm like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And they're like, "Well, there's this other guy, and he's a musician, and he's kind of got a lot of search volume, so you should change your name to something else. Maybe you should go like to your middle name." And I'm like, "That's my name. I'm like almost 50 years old. Like, I'm not going to change. What are you talking about?" And then I looked the guy up, and he's a one-man band. Like, he's got like the thing with like the drum on his back and like the harmonica and the accordion. And I'm like, how great is the search volume for the one-man band Dan Con? Like,
apparently a lot.
I guess. Wow. Like, maybe he's like the best-selling one-man band guy. I don't know, but I'm like, no, we're gonna just have to stick this one out. Sorry, I'm not changing my name.
Good for you. I like it.
Well, so thank you for coming on the show, and we try to have a balance. You know, this show is all about leadership, entrepreneurship, people kind of getting through. I mean, the whole name of the show is Only the Strong Survive for a reason. It's about kind of having to power through tough things to build things. And we've had a few guests on over the last few years that do focus on either nonprofits or kind of assisting people in need and in different spaces. And what you're doing really appeals to me. And I think I have some family members that are neurodivergent. And I've also seen that they can be pretty spectacular people with pretty incredible gifts that may not present themselves at sort of first contact, right? So I think what you're doing is great. And I would love to spend some time sort of talking about not just the what, but the why. Before we get into all of it, let's start with your path. What did you do kind of as you're going in through college and coming up? I don't know, were you always planning to go into sort of a role like this? How did that all come about?
Oh, no. This was not supposed to be my life journey at all. It's kind of funny how we end up where we're supposed to be. I always like to take it back, if it's okay, that I grew up in a family of the trades. So my family is originally from Long Island. I was the first one born in the South in Mason-Dixon line at Nashville, North Carolina. But my great-grandfather happened to be neighbors with a gentleman named Mr. Grumman that started a big company called Grumman. And then my grandfather, after Korea and Air Force, ended up working in Grumman, helped design the lunar module. And I always like to tell people, like, that actually really happened, by the way. It wasn't just a desert, New Mexico somewhere. Like, I promise it was real. Not many people know, too, that there's actually a plaque on the lunar module with all the people's name that helped to make that. So it's kind of cool when your grandfather's name is literally sitting on the moon with the lunar module. It's kind of neat.
Wow.
And then my dad was really one of my big inspirations, where he was an incredible athlete, got into a swimming accident, diving into a pool, compressed C2 in his spine, became quadriplegic, lost mobility. And then we don't know if it's a miracle or really stubborn. He ended up regaining a lot of mobility to the point he went back to college, had my brother and I. He still has some significant physical barriers in his movement, as well as his feeling. For example, like if he broke a toe or sprained his groin, he wouldn't feel it. And my brother and I were free labor in the trades. And so between my grandparents and my dad, every summer break, winter break, weekend, after school, I was free labor learning the trades. So naturally, when you do that, you're like, screw this, I'm going to run to Nashville and do music. So that's what I did, and ended up working out really well. I got to do music for a living in Nashville for over a decade, working with a lot of people you would recognize. It was amazing. And then my son Dylan was born, and around 2 years old was diagnosed with autism. And that was really the big catalyst that shifted in my life. And he was like 6.5 before he could say, "Hello, Dad, I love you." But he was always able to visualize and conceptualize and make these amazing things. That was that dad that let my son play with scissors. And I would like to clarify, like the kid scissors, not like the "I will murder you" kind of like scissors that we probably had when we were kids. And so I started, saying, okay, this is amazing. Is it just a family of upbringing in the trades, or is this Dylan? And at the same time, all of the autism programs that I was taking him to, all the various therapies, were deficit based. They would constantly tell me things that he needed to work on, from his eye contact to his toe walking to his sensory to his speech. They never recognized how good he was at making and fixing things. And so I started looking for a program. I couldn't find one, just to build up my son. And I had the chance to meet Dr. Temple Grandin. I don't know if you know who she is.
I do,
She's
yeah.
amazing. She's since become a really good friend, and said, "I've got this idea for a program called TACT. What do you think?" And she's like, "You need to put down your guitar and go do it." And for whatever reason, the right time in life, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I did. And now it's grown to become the largest transition education program for autistic individuals in the state of Colorado. We have gotten thousands and thousands of kids jobs. It's gotten partnerships from major international corporations like Toyota and Subaru and Miller Electric, the welding company, and Mitsubishi, and all these big companies that have come in to recognize not necessarily the idea of like the charity behind supporting this, but the return on investment. And I always like to say that there's a difference, right? When you see the ROI on supporting neurodivergent talent. Now TACT has a 19,000 square foot facility, full staff of almost 30 people. It's a multi-million-dollar company. I mean, it's been pretty amazing how much it's grown. And especially when I started it out of a 58 Chevy, driving around, teaching trades that my grandfather, great-grandfather, and dad taught me. So it's
Wow. Well, I guess that's, you were where you needed to be. I guess that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think without that upbringing, I would have the skill set needed for it, for sure.
So you've worked in education, you've worked in music. I think I've got some notes here that says you were in the military as well.
Yes, Air Force.
Very good. So is that what brought you to Colorado? Was it the Air Force or?
No, I'm a reservist out here still. So this weekend when I'm on base, I have to shave again. So no more beards. I used to have a shaving waiver. Those have gone away. It was honestly, Colorado was more progressive in regards to access to services than Tennessee was in Nashville.
Okay.
And it was difficult where Dylan was diagnosed. I couldn't get services in Davidson County, where I was having to travel to various therapy groups. I mean, autism, I think prevalence is where access to services has changed dramatically the last 15 years. And Colorado had better services that I could get my son more support. So I actually thought about moving back to Asheville, because even North Carolina is further ahead than Tennessee at the time. And at the time, Asheville going back was more expensive than Denver. So Denver was the cheaper option. That was a big part of it too. It's not that way anymore. Now Denver's outrageously expensive, but it's kind of funny how that happens.
So it sounds like what you've built is something that's sort of checking a couple of boxes, because obviously there has been a growing need for these services and these opportunities for neurodivergent people and autistic people. I think rather famously in the last few months, Jim Farley, who's the CEO of Ford, has gone on kind of a little mini kind of tour almost, where he's given a bunch of speeches about the importance of skilled trades and how, I mean, I don't remember the number. I wish I had it in front of me, but it's something in the thousands of positions that just Ford has open that he says are all six-figure jobs. Like, hey, look, we need, line mechanics, we need tool and die makers, we need all these people that can do these things. And we're going to pay you, you're 20 something years old. We're going to pay you $100,000+ a year. You just have to come in either with that background or the willingness to learn. And I mean, I literally just listened to a different podcast today about this, about, again, with the AI thing, where like, how do you make yourself sort of AI proof, right? Well, the world needs mechanics, the world needs plumbers, the world needs fabricators. I don't, at least until the robots decide to show up, those are going to be human jobs.
Yes.
What made you connect those dots? How did you was it your son being sort of mechanically inclined that got you on that path?
It was, and I think it was an incredible coincidence, honestly. And I didn't know if that was because of his autism or if it was the family upbringing what made him good at it. But when started working with him, started discovering that other kids were. And so you're right, I have a background in education, I have a master's in education, and designed the music program they used to teach music in Nashville. And the further I went down the rabbit hole, the more and more it seemed to be like, oh my gosh, this is the right fit. And then too, when you start looking back at the history of manufacturing, you start recognizing that a lot of those individuals most likely were, neurodivergent at that time. We didn't call it that. We probably called it something different. But now that we're starting to talk about it more, it worked out really well in the sense, and it continues to, in that when you look at the autism community, it's the highest unemployed demographic of any population at a near 90% unemployment or underemployed population rate. And when you think about, autism being the news and you hear folks talking about it's now 1 in 31, it's worth noting they only take that statistic from 8-year-olds in a handful of states. So I'd be willing to guess that there's actually a lot more folks than they even recognize, like those adults that aren't even getting the opportunity to actually be trained. At TACT, what we've ended up doing is changing the way that the education is sequenced and not actually asking the person to change. What's traditionally happened in any kind of training, especially in skills training, is it's just been this kind of one size fits all. But that doesn't work for everybody. I mean, I look at like my grandfather that I mentioned that helped put Neil Armstrong on the moon. He had a high school education. The Air Force trained him. And he designed, the electrical system that the lunar module used. Like, that's amazing. Today, like if you try to get a job like that, they're going to be like, where'd you get your PhD from? Oh, it's not Ivy League. You can't be the electrical engineer on a,
Right.
Space mission. Like, what are you thinking? That whole mindset has changed. But those individuals that kind of created that incredible progress in technology, they didn't have all of those fancy degrees. And the way that they learned was so much more holistic and hands-on. And that same generation, they fix things around the house. Kids today, your cell phone breaks, you bring it back to the store.
Everything's disposable.
Get a new one. Yeah, exactly. That generation, they figured out how did it work and they fixed it. I think we need to get back to that. And I think that the trades offer so much opportunity. And I think it's part of the reason TACT has such a high placement rate is that those businesses are seeing how talented our kids are. And they're recognizing, oh my gosh, this is an untapped talent pool. And the thing is now, when it started, it was me driving around on that 58 Chevy, like pretty much begging them, like, please hire our graduates. Like, would you look at all the things they can do? Now they come to us and say like, hey, this business hired your graduates. They're so happy. Can we hire some? This business hired more. And now it spirals. And now there's a Subaru dealership, for example, in Colorado here, that's like several layers deep where they're not just hiring them, they're like now promoting them to like management. And so you've got like the lube techs and the engine rebuilders and the managers that are all TACT graduates. How cool is that? That like entire dealerships now are having neurodivergent talent, like actually servicing those cars. It's pretty cool.
Now you mentioned the 1 in 31 number, and I think Secretary Kennedy has brought a lot of attention to that number. I think most people hadn't heard that until he started talking about it during his presidential run. And I even wonder, it's funny as somebody who, like I've mentioned, I have members of my family who have been diagnosed with autism. I also grew up in a family that was similar to yours, and that a lot of people that were in the trades. I think back on sort of my grandparents' generation, and both of them were parts of my grandmother and my grandfather had a lot of brothers and sisters, and a lot of them were involved in tool and die making, machine shops, kind of early space program stuff. I have several family members that if I think back to when I was a kid, they were probably on the spectrum. That just wasn't a thing yet, right? Like they didn't know what that was. But like I had an uncle who was nocturnal, and he was brilliant, and he ran his own business, and he was very successful, but he did not deal with other people, didn't want to deal with other people. He would go and work all night. He'd sleep during the day. He was an unusual dude, but brilliant. And today, maybe, I don't know. So I do, I wonder if this is something that has existed for a longer time than maybe the labels have. And I also really was kind of fascinated. You made a comment earlier about deficits. And that, so to explain that concept, see what you're saying is that in the kind of old system, you would bring a kid in there saying, here's the round hole, your kid's the square peg. How do we pound this
Yeah,
kid into that hole? Is that sort of the idea?
it's a couple things. Well, first, to go back to your grandfather or your family members, I think it's worth noting. Like, we used to call certain forms of autism Asperger's. We don't use that anymore, and the reason we don't is Dr. Asperger, that it was named after, was actually a Nazi that was actually studying autistic individuals to help their whatever the stuff they were doing. They looked at it as like, okay, these folks are super intelligent, super talented. How do we maximize upon
Really?
this? Uh-huh. And so
Okay.
when you start looking at, that's why we don't use that anymore. Where it's like, okay, we don't use this anymore. Now it's just part of the DSM-5
Yeah.
autism, and so it has been around for a minute, but we haven't really looked at it right in that regards. And where I come back to like the deficit approach is most education, right? Like, you're graded on what you've done wrong, and then they tell you how to fix it. Therapy and all those things. They're good people, not to put them down at all. Like, I mean, they did amazing things for my son, but their focus was on what's wrong and how to fix it. When we never went to school, and I think this is where TACT offers even a more unique solution in the sense that we never looked at, okay, Dan is really good at this. How do we use Dan's talents to get him set up for success for the future? It was, hey, you missed this algebra problem, and then you missed this, English part, you didn't get the noun right, or you didn't do this right in gym class. Like, it was always that, right? And in the therapy stuff, they're always trying to, say how people can change to what we view as agreeable. But the idea is, when you think about all of these great innovators in time, a lot of them are disagreeable in the sense that they see a solution to something that others aren't seeing, and they're trying to find ways of articulating. I think that's where creativity and innovation comes from, is those folks that are the outliers that are able to look at that and reframe that. And so, like, at TACT, for example, it's competency based rather than timetable based. So you and I went to high school for 4 years. If we went to college, it was for 4 years. If you ask any educator, why is it 4 years? Nobody knows. It seems to be this arbitrary number that we have come up with, where it's like 8 semesters, 4 years. But if you can do the job and you can develop the skills, why can't you just move along at that point? And those are some of the things that they're doing, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. And to me, it even connects to sort of a larger question, which is that I think until 2020, certainly most Americans anyway, sort of assume the education system is what it is. It's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. Short of some sort of black swan situation, my kids go to school and we're fine. And then we had a black swan situation. And
Yeah.
because I mean, for me personally, I can only speak to my own thoughts. Until 2020, I always thought homeschool kids were either kind of hippies or maybe a little bit like, crunchy granola, right? And not saying bad, just there was sort of a misconception on my part there, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden 2020 happens. And at the time I lived in California, so our schools were shut down for like a year and a half. And I had kids ranging in age at that time from kindergarten through 5th grade. Zoom school did not work for them.
Yeah.
Period. Like, it just didn't. And one of my kids is very smart, but has some learning stuff. And it really didn't work for him. And then we're like, okay, now we have to figure this out. And we got exposed to alternative schools, homeschools, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, first of all, not only is this not bad, I think this might actually be superior. And then we started meeting other families that are involved in these different, and like, at one point we had our kids in sort of this like community thing where a bunch of families kind of pooled together their resources and hired a retired teacher, and it was all STEM stuff. And the kids just like thrived. And we're like, and that's when I started doing my own research and realized, our formalized kind of current school system was actually designed in the 1920s to basically make better factory workers. And we're sort of engineering compliance out of these kids.
That's exactly right. And two, not only that, it was designed around farming, right? Where like, that's the reason schools have no summers, is because the parents would have to take time off to go help their parents like farm the crops. And we've just embraced this still, and we haven't moved along. And that's that like shoot down the middle, hope we get as much as you can, and then those folks on the outside. And it has led to the same results. And like, those folks that don't fit in that box get left out. And I think that it's time that people are finally starting to ask questions and be like, is this really the best way that we can do this?
And even beyond the neurodivergent community, I feel like something is happening, or I think as a result of maybe 2020 and the aftermath, I'm, at least in my community, which is basically a suburb, right? You meet as many people who have some sort of alternate education as don't. It's that common now. And maybe that doesn't mean hardcore homeschool. It might just mean my kid goes to school, but is also involved in some other kind of program, or, a magnet school, or some sort of, community learning situation. But I mean, it seems like people are starting to realize, like, oh, not everything has to be the way we've always done it. And we can find like a holistic approach to figure out how to help these kids learn in a way that works for them. And like, we had an event in our town that was organized. It was really cool. It was an event for homeschool kids that are involved in a maker program. And they had basically like it was kind of like a farmer's market type vibe. They all had their little booths, but the kids came to sell all their stuff, like their wares that they had made, but they had to handle the money. They had to make the change. They had to do all of it. And it was unbelievable. I mean, there was like first and second graders selling like hand knitted oven mitts and stuff. And I'm like, that's.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny you say that, because when you look at other countries and the way that they go about education, like some of like the Nordic countries, for example, they don't even teach kids to read until they're like 6 or 7. It's all around play. It's around socialization. It's around communication outside of like sitting down and reading a book and getting your ABCs and the things that we do. And likewise, they focus, when they get to high school, on careers and what does that look like? And you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about how, in the past it's been that, industrial revolution idea of like, okay, so you're 12, that means you're in this grade. You're 14, that means you're in, that's how a factory works, right? I mean, they're like moving people along just like that. And I think you're also right that now people are starting to wonder if there's alternative solutions. And I think people are getting great results from that, because when you think of how we rank as a country worldwide in math and English and science, we're not in the top. Like,
it's
not
not
even
working.
Like top 10. No, it's not.
I'm pretty sure we're like in the top 1 or 2 in terms of spending, and in the bottom in terms of outcomes.
Yes, 100%.
Which is not not good.
Exactly. And you think about too, when we get to now employment, right, and where that opportunities in the trades, we have pushed college. My stepson is now in college, and I'm blown away at how expensive it is. Like, his 1 year of college is dramatically more than like what my entire bachelor's degree cost. Now, mind you, I graduated in college in 2003, but still, like, that kind of inflation is wild.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I've got friends, their kids are in college, and you're talking $300,000, $500,000 for a degree. They will never see the return. I mean, like, they will be paying that off for years. And then parents taking out loans or all these different things to try to help their kids out. No one is winning from that. And then the trades, I think it was around 5,000 or so that you're talking about, Jim Farley was talking about. If you can be 22 and making $100,000 with no debt, why would you not?
Right.
Like, I mean, why would you not consider that? And if you want to go to night school and put yourself through college at the same time, do. Like, that's amazing. There's all these different learning options at that point. But why would you need the degree at that point? If you're providing for your family and you're enjoying what you're doing and you're feeling impactful, that's a pretty amazing opportunity. And it's surprising to me that there aren't more folks still doing it. And one of the things that we're starting in Nashville now, kind of going full circle, starting a program called Buildable Academy, where we're doing like a different version of TACT. We're taking all the things we've learned and we're making it scalable, where we can start going to these other places and say, this is a very important thing. We've learned all these different things. Please let us help you get this going, because we have to start investing in the infrastructure to get these workers going now. Like, we need to start working on it now.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit more about TACT. So, and earlier you said you had this conversation with Temple Grandin, and she said you should do it. So for those listening, if you don't know who that is, there's actually a great movie with Claire Danes kind of about her life. And she's just like, I guess, like an animal rights activist and also kind of an autism activist, sort of. Is that?
She's a professor. She has her doctorate in animal science, teaching like veterinarians and stuff. Yes, at CSU.
And like even teaching like how we should interact with livestock and animals in a humane way. It's a great story, and the movie's good too. So did you write a business plan for this? How do you approach with your, you've got a pretty diverse background. So like, how do you decide,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to change the world? How do you write a business plan for that?
You do this. Well, that's partly why the gray hair is so gray. I like that the sun's behind me. You can't tell how gray the hair has gotten here. But um, no, I mean, it was very, I don't want to say foolish or reckless, but very much just like a dad, like throwing everything into it, going for it. So we did have really good lawyers in New York for my music career that helped us get the C3 set up, so the 501c3 pretty quickly. And the education background, the trade background helped. But like I had never written a grant before and understanding how that worked or like navigated state and federal government, you know, understanding of how that worked with voc rehab and Medicaid. And I surrounded myself with people that did. And thankfully, those people helped make sure everything we've always done has been very much above board. Because if you're going to do something like this, you have to do it with integrity and honesty and transparency, or it loses value at that point. And so it started with that. And then a dad driving around in a vintage pickup truck. And then it grew into we had our first space was behind an old warehouse that was terrible, and in this old it literally was just metal sheathing, no insulation. And in Denver, at least 10 years ago, because TACT is 10 years old at this point, that was like the peak of the marijuana boom. So people would break in thinking we were growing marijuana, and they'd be like, "What is this trade program?" And so tools would get stolen, and it was rough. And it's kind of grown very organically and honestly, which I think makes it even that much more impactful because all those like steps have been harder at that point. And yeah, I mean, at the point of it now, we don't want families either spending the out of pocket expense because just like college, the average family is spending between $60,000 and $80,000 a year on autism services.
Wow.
Not many families can afford that. And so making it attainable for every socioeconomic class has always been at the core of it too, because everybody deserves this opportunity to learn a trade, feel successful, experience what that empowerment feels like, and then get the opportunity for a career of their choice.
And walk us through, I guess, the early days and now today.
Yeah.
What is TACT? So if you walked into a room and someone said, "I have no idea what you're talking about," so what's the age range of the
Yeah.
people that are participating? What kind of training are they getting? What kind of outcomes are you seeing?
That's a great question. It's diversified and it's unique in the sense that it's not just a training and education facility, it's a job placement facility. So schools work like you go in, you get a certificate or a degree, you graduate. That was the goal of that training. Goodbye, good luck, that kind of thing. TAC doesn't work like that. It's actually set up where as you're being trained, yes, you get the certificates, it's fully accredited, all of those kind of things, but you're also then matched with an employer and you're placed into that job. And then you have a supported employment specialist or a job coach, if you will, that goes out and works side by side you to help you with that transition process. So it's taking it to that next level of almost like a headhunter with a school and everything put in together. And when you're getting placed to that job, it's based upon your strengths. It's based upon the proficiencies that you've demonstrated so that you're going to be successful. And then with that, what we have seen is not only the highest employment rate of any neurodivergent placement program in the state of Colorado, maybe even further, but also the longest lasting program where the students are like sticking to the point of like 90 something percent where they're like lasting for a really, really long time. So it's been amazing results. And that's what then happens is then those businesses come back to us and say, we want more. It's no longer just this tokenism, like, okay, it's charity to hire one or two people that are neurodivergent. It's like, these kids are making our business better. I want more of them. How do we bring more in at that point? Which changes the narrative completely.
And what age do they start coming into the program?
Good question. So we have camps and workshops for kids to get exposed as young as age 6. That doesn't mean 6-year-olds aren't table saws and welding torches.
Right.
Like there's maker space and textile arts and different things that kids can say like, man, this is fun making things. The actual meat and potatoes of it is transition age, so 15 through 21. And then there's a post-secondary too that's people up into their 40s that come. And obviously those classes are taking place at different times. They're not gelled together where you have a 16-year-old with a 30-year-old, but they're taking different sequences of classes at that point.
And you've got, I think, just from being on your website, you've got, carpentry, electrical, welding, auto mechanics,
Yeah,
cooking. So it's a lot of those kind of skilled trades, voc ed type things, right?
very, very much so. Yeah. And it's set up, never more than 6 kids per class. It's a 3-to-1 ratio, like a real 3-to-1 ratio, not like, let's count the board and the office manager and the reception, like those kind of things. Like you're genuinely a 3-to-1 ratio. And last year, 1,057 students went through TACT. So there are classes
Wow.
going all the time, nights, weekends, during the day. 17 counties students came from, 7 states families moved from to actually come to Colorado. And I think that's part of the reason the Buildable is going to be so impactful, of then taking the ideas and practices and spreading it out and helping others get this going.
And so our agency, and we have a couple of agencies sort of in the background, but our primary agency focuses mostly on automotive and transportation.
Yeah.
Beyond the Jim Farley thing, which obviously, in like your Subaru example of a dealership, right? We also work with the aftermarket, where a lot of parts manufacturers, even car builders. And I can tell you, the custom car builder thing is actually a pretty impressive microeconomy. And
It really is. Yeah.
these are really entrepreneurial people, and they are really desperate for help. I mean, every car builder we work with is in a labor crunch right now. Have you worked with them as part of the job placement program?
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point on that, talking about that, do you know who John Elder Robinson is?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah, he runs the Bentley repair shop. He's an autistic individual that Bentley trusts up in Boston to actually spearhead that. He's an interesting guy in the sense that he did like sound with Kiss and like did the music for Atari and super interesting guy, but trusts with that level of expense and perfection. I mean, like Bentleys I've never been in one, but they look really nice.
They look,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that like the craftsmanship is nice, right, for that kind of money. But yes, we have kids that go to hot rod shops, classic car shops, car dealerships, Jiffy Lubes. Some work in parts houses. Napa just donated $350,000 worth of tools to support those that are going. Advanced Auto Parts came in and donated all of the curriculum that they do, because Advanced puts all of their people through different things. And then likewise, the students have access to like a database of like how to work on the different cars that Advanced uses, and that helps them as well. So it's been really neat that all those companies have come in, and again, they're not doing it just because it's a nonprofit, but they need workers and they're willing to invest in that. And I think that's really powerful.
What was the hardest part early on? Was it getting employers sold on this concept of hiring these kids? Was it funding? Was it the model? I mean, how those first steps are usually the hardest.
It was everything. It was, we got turned down for insurance 13 times.
Wow.
Because insurance companies would look at us and be like, you want to put a welding torch in the hand of an autistic kid? Like, I mean, there was that. It started mobile as me driving around the truck. So I would go to like special education schools, and they would be like, wait, our kids can't do this. I mean, even the, quote unquote professionals would be like, this isn't going to work with our kids. Then there was being a nonprofit, finding people willing to donate money to something new that had no track record. And grants and foundations, they don't want to do that. And then when you run a nonprofit, most foundations or any kind of big group that likes to donate money, they call it the 80-20 rule in nonprofits, where they want 80% to go to the program, only 20% to the admin. But that makes it hard to pay your staff. And a lot of them don't recognize, like, you can't have a program if you don't have a staff, or you don't have a building and lights on and all those different things. And so balancing that became very, very tricky. Getting the students, ironically, that was not the harder part. Families seemed to really kind of dive in right away, where families were like so instantly appreciative of recognizing their child's strengths being recognized, because it turns out like me, a lot of parents were tired of hearing from therapists and doctors what was quote unquote wrong with their kid, and actually starting to see them do good things and succeed and be powerful and empowered. And I can't tell you how often you see a parent cry watching their kid make something, and they realize like, wow, my kid can really do this. Because, and I'm talking like parents of kids that are in their 30s or 40s, where for decades they've been told like, your child's not going to, live independently or have a job or a career. And if they have had a job or a career, it might be part-time at a coffee house or at a restaurant or something like that. And if that's what somebody wants, God bless them. I hope that they find happiness in that. But a lot of them wanted to have other experiences and wanted the opportunity to succeed. And, I always talk about, when I taught my son to ride a bike, it was not a great experience. It was really hard getting to teach him to ride a bike. I'm sure that there are some parents that are just like, their kid just rode a bike instantly or caught a ball instantly. That was not my experience. But can my kid like make these amazing things and use all these tools? Heck yeah, he can. And like, I'm really proud of that like he got that opportunity to do that and actually, experience success in that capacity.
That's really cool. Can you give us some examples of success stories coming out of the program?
Yeah. There's so many. I think it's neat. Like I told one on Micro Podcast, and I'm sure that's probably where the gentleman that introduced us, the folk that introduced us, probably heard me first speaking. But
yeah, shout out Pat Curtin. Hey, Pat.
Yeah. Had talked about Coors, where Coors hired one of the graduates, and on the day one, they noticed something that wasn't really being successful in the brewing process, and actually brought that up. And that person that worked at Coors was like, "Oh my gosh, they're right!" And like, how cool is that they actually listened? I had a parent come to me the other day that their child was working at a Ford dealership and is now at a Dodge dealership, but still driving a Ford F-350. And apparently those have like massaging seats, which I didn't even know was a thing. And the parent was so happy because their child, when they first came to TACT, was in a program that had 3 specialists beside them because they thought they were violent and could cause troubles because they didn't understand their autism. And not only was that individual successful when given the tools to do it, but now has a thriving career working at a Dodge dealership. And how amazing is that now this person, almost 30, is doing really well and thriving. And
I mean, isn't that every parent's goal though? I think, right. I mean, like, it's just, you want your kid to be just self-sufficient, happy, member of society. I mean, that's I think most parents, I'm sure there's the ones out there that are like, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or don't talk to me again. But I think most of them are just like, I just want you to be happy and to be self-reliant, right?
I think that's exactly right. And the amazing thing is it's providing those opportunities to do that. And I had one student come one time. He was working as a carpenter. He pulled up in a brand new BMW M2, which is a pretty freaking awesome car, by the way, because he's making really good money. His dad was following him in his dad's pickup, and then it was a motorcycle that he was donating. So he was in turn donating, and the parents were happy because the kid was successful working as a carpenter, and he wanted to show off the new car that he bought for himself. And like, this is a young individual, and I mean, how amazing is that they then turn and wanted to come back and donate this motorcycle.
This is to the program, so kids can learn how to work on it.
The kids. Yeah, exactly. Wow. And I mean, there's so many stories like that where the kids then come back and talk about how successful they've been. And when they feel appreciative of that opportunity, I mean, I graduated from App. I love App. App has been very good to me. I've never taken my kids there. I would love to one day. I mean, maybe because it's part across the country. They've certainly never seen where I went to high school. But when people take the time to come back to those different things, I think that that's pretty powerful at that point. And it's also funny because then the teachers get upset because, if you're teaching at a nonprofit, we don't have the money to pay them a lot. And so the graduates are making more money than the teachers. It's kind of funny how that's happened. But
yeah. That's interesting. So since you are kind of part job placement organization as well, I assume you have a lot of conversations with business owners, hiring managers, people at these organizations.
100%.
What's the business case that you make for neuro-inclusive hiring, and why they should consider it?
It's talking about on task time. It's talking about reliability, dependability. It's talking about retention. For example, I had a cement company come to us, and in a year, they had almost a complete 100% turnover rate because they couldn't find people willing to work at the concrete factory. When you look at our graduates, they are on task. They're not wanting to like talk about what they saw on Facebook, what they did at the bar last night, who won the Broncos game. They're wanting to work. That's what they want to do. They're there to work.
Locked in, as my kids would say.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
You look at all of these different studies about how often people really are focused at work. It's not as much as you would think. Like, it's a lot of socialization and chit chat and not very much productivity. Neurodivergent talent, and there's tons of studies to show it, are on task and on time. Likewise, they're incredibly loyal. Once they get placed, they're not looking to go, to the shop across the street for a quarter more, because they're happy and they feel valued and respected. And they recognize that value and respect is worth it, even if they can make a quarter more across the street or a buck more. That's not the value to them. It's the feeling of empowered and successful and as part of something bigger. That makes them stick. That's part of how the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce came about, where TACT had won an award with the Denver Business Journal, and we've won in the nonprofit sector. And I was sitting on a table with a bunch of really big businesses that aren't just in Denver, but all over. And they were talking about the various chamber of commerce that they work with, from the women's chamber to the Hispanic chamber, et cetera. And then they got to me, and this was in 2022, and they were like, what's neurodiversity? And it was like, oh my gosh, like, you're working with all these chambers and you recognize, you need new talent, but you don't even know that this demographic exists. And thankfully, I got to start that with two other incredible individuals, and it became the first one in the country, which is wild. And now we've helped a few other states get that too. But that came from, we needed more interaction with businesses. Now TACT has over 100 different businesses that it works with that are hiring graduates. And so it's pretty amazing.
That's amazing. And speaking of TACT and even the chamber, when you talk to these groups or individual companies, and you kind of hear their stories, and obviously you're, I'm sure, following your students as they go through their careers, where do these companies sort of mess up in terms of interviews, job postings, managing these folks? Like, when it doesn't stick or the hiring process doesn't go well, what are the kind of trap doors they need to look out for?
They don't know what to ask. And I think that's where they've missed the mark in regards to asking the right questions. Here's an example. One of the graduates, again, we have the supported employment, the job coaches that go with the folks to actually do with the interview, was at a company. This was a tech company, and the employer asked them, are you proficient in Excel? Most people would lie and be like, heck yeah, I'm proficient in Excel, right? I have never met a single person in my life that is proficient in Excel. But you see on people's resume all the time, proficient in Microsoft Word, proficient in the Microsoft Suite. BS. They're not, right? But those kind of questions are asked all the time in interviews. Neurodivergent folks are inherently honest, which is part of that disagreeability factor, right? Where they struggle is they're going to be honest, and they see people that are dishonest being successful, and they don't understand why, stereotypically speaking, because they're taught and believe being honest is important. So this candidate says no. And so then the hiring manager goes to go like, okay, well, this might not work. And thankfully the supported employment specialist goes, no, that's the wrong question. Ask him what are the things he likes to do with Microsoft Excel. And so the hiring manager obliges, asks the question. The candidate then goes into all of these formulas that they can do, all of the amazing graphs they can make, all the formulas they already have memorized. That was the right question. That's what the HR person really wanted to know, but they asked the question the wrong way. And that costs $0 to actually learn how to ask the question the right way. And so when you think of hiring managers, they take these blanket templates they've been using for a long time, but they're not really geared to asking the questions of the things that they want to know. And then you hear from businesses all the time, I can't find any good candidates. You're not asking the right questions. You don't even know what the right questions are to ask to find the candidates that you want. And that's where I think, like, to what we were talking about, like AI and robots, I don't see AI robots being on the side of the road fixing your flat tire, at least for another 10 years, if not our lifetime. Is it already scanning through resumes and trying to match based on algorithms? Absolutely. Is that excluding a whole bunch of talent? Definitely. I mean, I have a top secret clearance with the Air Force. Just to prove that point, I applied for a job as a security guard, and they said I wasn't qualified to actually do it. And it's just interesting, right? Like the ways that these formulas are built upon, certain employees and trying to match those certain employees. Well, you don't want all of the employees the same. Or, where it comes from progress is people being able to talk about ideas, have difference of opinions openly, like disagree, grow and learn and question, and then actually move forward together. If everybody agrees with everything all of the time about everything, nothing moves forward there.
Very, very interesting. I like the way you frame that. What does a reasonable accommodation within an organization look like
Yeah.
for these folks, where they want to sort of embrace somebody with a different skill set or perspective without lowering the bar, so to speak? How do you recommend they manage that?
Statistically speaking, the average ADA accommodation in America costs less than $500. The average HR cost to hire and train somebody new, get it posted, get the HR person's time setter is $2,500. It costs businesses, thus they get to keep more money, a lot, costs them a lot less to embrace an accommodation than to fire somebody and try to do something new. A reasonable accommodation can be a variety of things, from a seat that needs arms rather than doesn't have arms, or it needs to be able to sway back and forth. It can be, please don't put my desk by the bathroom, please have my desk by the window. It can be the lights, during the day, give me headaches. Can I have different light bulbs in the lights? It can be, I'm relying on public transportation. I can't get to work at 6 a.m., but I can be there by 6:30 and I can stay till 7 rather than leaving at 5. It can be a variety of different things that help that person be successful. It wouldn't be, like, hey, I can only work 15 minutes a day, but I want to be paid for 8 hours a day. Different
Yeah,
things that
right.
people think of as broad things, but it's not very much in that. And so, I think too, here's another example. One of the graduates got placed into a job with a company called Rexel. They do electronic wire manufacturing and distribution. And for whatever reason, they had a culture where they had everybody on a whiteboard or chalkboard, their names, and they would keep track also of errors during the day, and how many pallets they had to do and all these different things. And so the TACT graduate saw 0 by their name and got really upset and was like, oh my God, a 0, right? We were talking about school. If you see your name in a 0, that means you failed. But what it really meant was this person had done 0 things wrong. They got every package done right. So they had 100%, but rather than the company rating like 100% done, like everything, they put 0 things left. But it wasn't communicated to that individual what that meant. Little things that get like lost in the actual language of just culture, that, like, for whatever reason at businesses, we kind of go with the flow.
Interesting. We've talked about TACT and the chamber, but you also lead another organization, the Colorado Disability Opportunity Office. What is the mission for that, and kind of why that organization?
Yeah. So my wife is running TACT now. We make just a great team. In reality, she was always doing more than me anyway. She's just amazing. I want to give her credit for what credit's due. So I was asked by the governor to run this new organization in Colorado. We became one of the first states to actually have a disability policy advisor. So most states actually have, a policy advisor in education, on housing, on transportation, on energy, all of these different things, right? Governors need to be advised on. They don't have advisors on disability. And you think about the fact that disability is something that most of us will experience at some point of our life, especially as we get older. the fact that governors aren't thinking about what does that look like when this person's in their 60s or 70s and their bodies are starting to deteriorate and they need support. Not only that, they don't have statistics or numbers or data or anything. And so no wonder costs of all kinds inflate and get kind of wild. So Colorado became one of the first, and it's become so successful that they wanted to make sure that that stayed for future governors. And so they passed a law and created a new office called the Colorado Disability Opportunity Office. And they put me in charge of that, which is amazing that we get to share disability voice. So if somebody's talking about language access or housing or transportation, we get to do that. The neat thing, that one of the things I think is most inventive about it, is they didn't want to raise taxes to do it. And so they ended up reissuing past historic license plates. So at one point in the 50s in Colorado, we had a black license plate that was all black, just like California and a whole bunch of other states, and a red one and a blue one, and then a green mountains with a white sky, as opposed to the inverted version here. And they said, hey, if you want this cool historic plate on your car that Colorado used to use, the funds will go to disability funding, and we'll see how it does. And you get a cool license plate on your car. Well, that has generating about $1.4 million, $1.5 million a month of that many people that like that idea of that. So now we're generating tens of millions of dollars that go to disability programming without raising taxes. It's just because people want a cool license plate on their car, which is different than like a disabled veteran plate, or I went to app plate, or Autism Pride, or there's different things like that. It's not the same because it's not branded with anything. It's just cool. And we get to then take that and give it to all these different nonprofits and programs across the state that are working with people with disabilities. And so 63 organizations right now are being funded by us. So it's pretty amazing.
That's really cool. As we kind of wind this up, a lot of our listeners, we have a B2B audience. We have a lot of listeners that are business owners or business leaders. If people are listening to this and they're thinking, wow, this might be something I want to pursue, this sounds really cool, but maybe they're feeling a little overwhelmed, or like that first step is sort of a big one in terms of reaching out, recruiting and hiring, people from the autism community, or even specifically from your program. What piece of advice would you give a business leader who maybe wants to do this but might feel a little overwhelmed, or like that first step is sort of like they don't know what to do?
Yeah, I would ask them to reach out. I'm pretty approachable. I mean, you guys found me. So I would say that I always like to help. I mean, I think that's one of the things. B, I would encourage them to have an open mind and, kind of question the narrative that they've learned about autism. I would guess that when most people hear that, they think it's a bad thing. That's what I thought. When my son was diagnosed with autism, I thought, oh my gosh, what does this mean? All these different thoughts, because that's what we were taught, right? That this meant something bad. But I think as we're learning more, it's starting to bring upon more of us recognizing that this isn't something that we should shy away from or be afraid of, that maybe that there is this opportunity for a demographic that we haven't even recognized is there that can really bring upon our business. And so I would definitely encourage them to look for the programs that are supporting that talent in their area.
I love that. This has been fantastic, Danny. As you think back, not just Colorado Disability Opportunity Office, the Chamber of Commerce, TACT, but even your time as a musician, in the Air Force, as you think back on you, because you've had this really incredible career and now you're helping other people build these careers, what's the biggest mistake you made and what did you learn from it?
I think one of the mistakes I continue to make is I'm very trusting and willing to support people and hoping them do the best thing. Some people take advantage of that, but it feels like the right thing to do. I don't know if you've ever seen the Mother Teresa quote where it's like, if people put you down, or creators create anyway, there's this great thing that she has. I think there's that. I think I've overextended. I would encourage people not to overextend up to a lot of things like that. I think, as I get older, I find myself prioritizing being with my kids more. I mean, the great irony for me is I built this for my son, and in a lot of ways I sacrifice time with my son to build it. And as I get older, I recognize that, and I wish I could change that and have had him see that it was for him, and I wouldn't have had to sacrifice time away from him to do that. That's a hard thing to balance when you're being entrepreneurial and trying to build something from the ground up. And I'm willing to bet some of your listeners have also had to sacrifice time for their family and loved ones for actually trying to support their family and loved ones, and finding that is difficult sometimes.
That's valid. And I think, unfortunately, that's sort of the deal we all make when we start something, right? Out of curiosity, how old is your son now?
17.
And I assume he's gone through the program?
Oh, of course. I mean, I have one of his early welding projects that I keep all my stuff with here. I got like my little thing that he welded. Obviously, his welds have gotten a lot better.
Very cool.
Yeah, I keep his little stuff all.
Does he have an idea of what he wants to do?
He wants to do film, ironically.
Okay.
That's the thing he wants to. So he is really into cameras and actually he actually is doing a school project right now. And he has to do a documentary, and he decided to do it on TACT and neurodiversity. And so that's the thing he seems really interested in.
That's really cool. Well, congratulations on doing something great for your son that has now helped so many people. That's really admirable.
Thanks, Dan.
Well done. Danny, this has been great. Where do people learn more about you, about TACT, about the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce, about the Disability Opportunity Office? Yeah. Where do they go?
I have got just a generic website for myself called coloradoneurodiversity.com. They can go to that and links to all of them. TACT is built with tact.org, or the Neurodiversity Chamber is cndcc.org. CDU is cdu.colorado.gov. I find this, the coloradoneurodiversity.com, is just an easier get into everything kind of situation. So
very good. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope we can touch base again. So that's a wrap for this episode of Only the Strong Survive. Please be sure to subscribe and leave a review on the platform you're listening to. Just a really great conversation, and wanted to say thank you very much. So Danny, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
You bet.